What's cool about this, I'll take a moment to share is, whoever's watching, whether you're religious or not, the truth is these aren't Christian problems, these aren't non-Christian problems. These are human problems. These are things that everyone across the board is dealing with. Hey, and welcome again to Motivational Monday. Our aim here is to help you start your week off with strong mental health. We're back with our friend and guest, Peter Pignon, who is a licensed professional counselor of more than 10 years. And Peter loves Jesus. He loves helping others. And I'm so excited to have you on, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. The sun is shining, and that's a good thing over here
Uh,
in
I'm
Texas.
so happy to hear that.
Yeah.
So our question for today, Peter, our topic is anxiety. And the question that we have is, how do I overcome anxiety? There's
Yeah.
so much right now that feels unknown. It feels out of our control. How do we overcome and even thrive in this season?
Yeah. It's a real challenge for us. I mean, I've talked to some people that their whole life has never had any significant anxiety because we all feel it.
Yeah.
But in this, there's been seasons or days or long moments of feeling that anxiety. And I think it's helpful for us if we're going to overcome it. What is this enemy? What is this that we're dealing with? What is anxiety? I think it's helpful to know what it is. And anxiety is are these thoughts that are telling us, hey, there's a threat. There's a
Mm,
threat. But we don't know
wow.
exactly where it is. It's like there's a threat, and it could be there, it could be here. So this virus really presents a lot of different types of threats. There's economic threats, there's relational threats, and then there's legitimate physical threats there. So there really are a lot of different things that can make our brain say, whoa, there's a threat. And as soon as we perceive a threat, our body goes into this fight, flight, freeze mode of
Yeah.
like, what do? I need to survive. So it's like the thoughts are pushing the stress button of like, you need to get ready for something. So the system is working overtime. So I think that's a big thing for us, is to recognize what it is that's happening. Anxiety is describing the thought content. And
Yeah.
then that we're in our body, stress is describing what's happening in the body, that we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And we're stuck at home. So a lot of us are kind of just either shaky or thinking about like everything that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
So that's step one, like just acknowledging like what is happening, why are we experiencing anxiety. And a lot of us are confused of like, man, I've never felt this way before.
Yeah, and not to interrupt you, Peter, because I
Yeah,
love that.
please.
Just hearing that, I wanted to say, just hearing that is helpful. Just recognizing and understanding what's happening almost gives me a sense of getting back in control because I have an idea of what's going on, so
Mhm.
that I can at least, have a sense of how to respond to it.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, there's so many threats. There's so many threats all of a sudden. I mean, we didn't have, we had normal threats. So we'll walk down the street, maybe somebody would jump out and take our wallet, or there's these threats that we were more aware of, and we knew how to manage those.
Yeah.
But there's these threats, and the virus is our enemy, and
Mhm.
we don't know where it is. We
Yeah.
can't see it. So it's like this silent, this invisible enemy, and we still have to go get food for our families, and we still have to interact and expose ourselves to the enemy, but we can't see it. So it's like anxiety's there, and then the enemy, and it's all this interaction. So that's kind of like just setting the context for how we're going to overcome this. So if we're going to overcome something, we got to know what the enemy is. And I don't think that anxiety in and of itself is the actual enemy. I think it's that we're perceiving all these threats.
Mm.
And so the
Wow.
first thing that I would say is we need to limit those things that trigger anxiety when possible. So once you know what it is and what that feeling is, that like, oh, there's a threat, then we can figure out what is that trigger. When this first started for me, man, I was looking every single day, multiple times a day, at the case count and the death count. And I'm reading the news, and I'm on social media. I'm trying to see if any of my family or friends are dealing with this thing. And it was overwhelming me. It's like I would have never given myself permission to check the news that many times
Yeah.
in pre-COVID. But now I'm like, I
That's
gotta
so
know what's
beyond.
happening. I gotta know all this stuff. So my brain and mind were already working overtime, and I was getting triggered and triggered and triggered and triggered and triggered. So the thoughts were pushing that anxiety button. And then I realized, I'm like, well, I do need to stay informed, but I'm going to limit it. I'm going to limit my time on social media. So this is a good time to be on social media right now. But just scrolling and even like the news outlets or keeping things on, like, limit that time, because that is telling you there's a threat, there's a threat, there's a threat, and there is a threat. There's a legitimate threat, but we're not exposed to it every moment. Yeah, we go out and get food, we're exposed, we'll wash our hands, we sanitize, we do what we can, we wear a mask, we wear gloves. It's like there are these things that we can do, but when we limit that, that really does help us a lot, and we can overcome anxiety with that one. So that's one.
Okay.
Any questions on that one?
Well, I mean, just no question, but literally, I felt a little convicted as you were sharing because I was doing the same thing just on Twitter,
Yeah.
where the constant in my whatever the trending section of Twitter is, the constant thing at the very top is updates on COVID-19,
Hmm.
and I would go there multiple times a day, and it would leave me in that place of constantly thinking about it. And I
Hmm.
did begin to feel better once I was like, yeah, this is no longer fun.
Yeah. Because we can't change anything. We're going to do the
Yeah,
same thing. We're going to quarantine. We're going to have the same things in our day, no matter what the case count is.
yeah,
So we're already at the most protected we can be. So that even helps us to say, hey, look, there is a threat, and the threat is real, but the threat is not here right now. I'm okay. I'm as safe as I can be. I'm doing everything I can. So that brings us to the second thing is, can we refocus on encouraging things? So we're limiting our triggers, but then when we are in control and we're not triggered, can we refocus on things that are encouraging, bringing up courage? Hey, I'm safe in my house. I wash my hands. I'm feeling good, because like any tickle in my throat, any pressure anywhere, it's like you start thinking about, oh man, all this stuff is going on inside me. But we refocus on, what's encouraging. What are some, messages? What are some movies that encourage us? That, I've watched comedy,
yeah,
more in this season, just to kind of help lighten the mood and think about other things. Because again, knowing about all these threats doesn't, it only helps us so much.
yeah,
Then we need to refocus on encouraging things, and that's what we're doing right now.
yeah. And that reminds me of the Apostle Paul in the book of Philippians, where he was talking about be anxious for nothing, and
Yeah.
his progression is exactly that. Now, and what's cool about this, I'll take a moment to share is, whoever's watching, whether you're religious or not, the truth is these aren't Christian problems, these aren't non-Christian problems, these are human problems. These are things that everyone across the board is dealing with. And what's amazing is to see how this is clearly what you're sharing, Peter, is clearly an outline in scripture where he talks about first be anxious for nothing and just bringing it all to God, but then he shifts his focus and saying think on all things that are good, these
Yes.
things that are good, that are noble, that are righteous, that are uplifting.
Right on.
He's like, hey, set your mind on those things. Forget about all of that stuff, and set your mind on these. So that was just beautiful. I love that.
It's so good. It's so good. And I love that you brought that up, because that's the biblical principle of where I get this encouragement that I'm saying right here. Like, we have to shift our focus. It's not saying don't feel anxious. It's saying don't be. If you just stay in it,
Yeah,
you stay in it. Like, you recognize, oh, I'm anxious. Okay, I'm feeling anxious. We talked about last time, admitting it, expressing it, and
yeah,
then we shift. We go over here. What is God doing? And I think it's super helpful to see that. And I think that this next thing is a little bit harder for me personally. Is we need to breathe. So the stress response changes our breathing in our body, and it makes us like take shallow breaths. Sometimes, like, if you read a news headline that says that something really bad happened, we go, and
yeah,
we stop breathing for those moments, and we don't realize that our breathing gets dysregulated, and our breath and our breathing patterns are the number one way that we communicate to our whole system that we are okay.
wow,
So when you can say, and just take a breath like that. Even, 1 is good, 3 is better, 5 is awesome, 10 would be amazing. And you take those breaths, you're giving your body oxygen, and you shift from this fight flight mode to this more relaxed mode. And it actually helps you to embrace the things that are encouraging that you're trying to work on. So it's like you're over here limiting your triggers, you're focusing on encouraging content, and then you're breathing to kind of get yourself in this more receptive, open-handed mode. And that's the last thing that I would say that would be super helpful that we can do right now. We can do that right now as we're watching. We can do that later on. You can do that before bed. You can do that when you wake up. It's a great thing to do.
Well, you know what? For everyone watching, why don't you just pause right now and just take a breath, or 3, right? The more, the better. And just take a deep breath and slowly breathe out and remind yourself you're good right now.
More
You're good.
valuable.
Yeah. And I mean, you're just on a roll. And as you were sharing that, a thought came to my mind, thinking about parents, right? Of kids of really any age. This is something you can do together. Like I can picture a family, say a mom, dad, and kids that are maybe in middle school or something. You can sit down together as a family and do a breathing exercise potentially, and just encourage each other. Like I can't imagine the positive benefits that would have as a family in bonding as well as overcoming anxiety. Peter, I did have one question in connection to the breathing exercise, right? So for the person who's sitting and watching this and going, man, I don't know if I can bring myself to do that. I'm so busy. I don't have the time, especially in this season. I'd imagine you might have the time, but especially like, what would you say to someone like that who thinks, hey, that just kind of feels unproductive. Can I really just stop to breathe? Why can't I breathe while I'm doing something, or whatever the case is? What would you say to that person?
I would say just start wherever you are. If you feel like it's too weird to just stop what you're doing and breathe, then just take a deeper breath. So you don't want to deep breathe yet, but just take a deeper. Because again, some of those breaths are they're a little shallower than they normally are. So if you can just take a deeper breath and just start small.
Yeah.
Like I said, even if you just take one, just recognizing what are those moments when we start to tense up. If we stop breathing, our muscles go into like, whoa, what's happening? Something bad. There's a threat. And then our minds are like, oh, there's a threat. Well, we got to figure out where is it? Where's the threat? So when we can just start small and breathe. I mean, I know for me, it was such a weird thing to just stop and breathe. I felt like I was crazy, or what am I doing this stuff? Like, but being able to see it, and I'll give you the biblical validation, is breathing is what made us human.
Wow.
God breathed into the body, and that's when Adam came to life.
Wow.
So I think of it like that. That's the biblical idea for me, is every time I take a deep breath, I'm reminded that God gave me that breath of life as a human being. And it's a beautiful thing to think that God has given me this air, and he has allowed me to take that breath. And that is, it gives so much relaxation. It gives nourishment to the muscles and the organs. We need that oxygen. So when we cut ourselves off of that oxygen, we do sometimes, if we don't, we feel like we're being suffocated. So give yourself some air. And that's what I tell my kids. I'm like, hey, whoa. Hold on. Just get some air. Let's breathe. Ready? Let's get some air. And then, let's calm down. We're going to calm down. It's all right.
Yeah. No, I love that. I'm not even going to add anything to that. That was beautiful. So last week we did this, and I wanted to ask you again, Peter, what would be our Motivational Monday tip? Something that they can walk away with, and there's so much that they can walk away with and do, which I hope you guys do as you're watching this, that even as you're watching this, you would especially breathe. But is there a tip that you would give to say, hey, in terms of a long-term sustenance of this is something you can do?
Yeah. I think one thing that has helped me the most in this time has been having a gratitude journal. And so that's what I would say. Can you start a gratitude journal? And that might be mental, and it might be actually writing things out. It might be typing things out in your phone. It might be texting it to a family member, but just being able to say, can I come up with 2 to 5 things that I'm grateful for. And sometimes it might be as simple as like food, water, air, shelter, but you stay that basic and it changes. It's that refocusing concept. And the verse that you mentioned in Philippians 4:6, it says that we don't have to be anxious, but then we can come to God and pray. So we can connect to God. We can tell him what we need. We can give him our petitions. And then it says, with thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So that's where we get this. This tip comes from that same passage, that we have to come with thanksgiving. If we're not going to be anxious living in it, we want to come with thanksgiving to God. So I'm like, God, thank you for all this. Thank you for the basic things. Thank you for the big things. Thank you for my wife and my kids. And thank you for my family. Thank you for my church family that's trying to reach out to me through technological means, because we can't hug each other's neck right now. So it's like you overload your brain with gratitude. It's so much harder to think about the anxiety. It's so much harder to think about the threats. And this is a great practice for the rest of our lives. Not just now, but especially now. I think it's helpful to have that gratitude journal. And again, don't get stuck on the journal word. You make it your own. You can tell us right now what you're grateful for. You can share it. You could post it every day. There's different ways, but it just really helps us. And it's as old as the Bible. Paul says, it's like prayer, petition, and he's like, with thanksgiving. He's like, he just throws it up out there real quick. And sometimes we miss that. We come with our needs with thanksgiving. Hey, I need this, but I have all of this.
Your own way. Yeah, and I really, really hope that this was helpful for everyone who's watching. And man, we are so excited, and we want to hear from you. We want to know, how is this impacting you? How are you applying some of what we're talking about in this conversation here? So that's it for today. Peter, thank you so much for being on. Thank you guys for watching Motivational Monday. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and if you found it really helpful, share it with a friend or family member. God bless you guys. Until next time.